Hello everyone, it is Erin, Floto here, and we are starting the new year off with my January setup. This year I wanted to challenge myself to pair two things that don't necessarily go together into a theme. So I used two wheels, I spun them to decide each of my themes in 2025. So the thing from wheel 1 is going to be paired with the thing from wheel 2. One of the reasons I decided to go with this is because last year I felt all my creativity stripped by just doing color themes and using washi tape. So this year I needed to break that mold and come up with something that would truly spark my creativity. I've made sticker kits for each month to help me out, since this year there is an overwhelming amount of things that are going on that I need to stay on top of. But mostly in these setup videos, I want to draw a good portion of them and use sticker kits as additional decoration. So that is what I'm doing here. This entire setup took just under an hour to film, though I'm planning to add more to it once we get closer to January. So stay tuned for my December to January migration video at the end of Vlogmas to see anything that I may have added to my setup. I wanted to set myself up with the basics for the setup and then decide anything additional that I may need. That's one of the things that I didn't do in 2024. That I really regretted towards the end. So I really wanted to make sure that I am adapting every single month to things that I need. For example, I am filming this in November, but come January, I will have a newborn. And life is very, very different with a newborn, and I've never had a baby before. So I don't really know what I need to track, or if tracking on paper is going to be what's best for us. So I'm going to experiment with things in December before committing anything to my January setup. So I really stuck to the basics here for my January setup. So the two things paired up for January were streetlights and clouds. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is make this a very dreamlike state. And I wanted to take inspiration from Hercules a little bit with these really really artistic type of clouds. I didn't want to fill in the clouds. I didn't want them to be realistic. I wanted them to be very whimsical, with a lot of curly cues and things like that. And of course, I add January to the cover page. I mentioned this in another Vlogmas video. I can't remember if it's going to come out before or after, but I have no problems with white space. And actually, I have really adapted myself to taking on more white space than usual. So I've really enjoyed using a lot more white space recently, especially because of how much white space that I was using with washi tape. I really needed to kind of embrace the idea of white space. So that is what I did in this spread as well. Plus, I am using a B5 notebook. It is a lot of space to fill. So if I were in an A5, maybe I would not have as much white space, but honestly, I've kind of embraced it, and I kind of love how it ends up turning out. It's just complicated enough that it feels like it's not empty, but it is also not trying to fill every nook and cranny in these spreads. So as I mentioned, I am going to be using some of my staples for these setups. One of those things is a monthly calendar. I thrive off of a monthly calendar. That wasn't always the case in my earlier years of doing bullet journaling. Maybe not the earlier years. I think the earlier years I still used the calendar. Maybe towards the middle of my years in bullet journaling. I have been doing this for 8 years now. So it's been a long time. 9 years? I started in 2015, I believe. So it's been a hot minute since I started doing bullet journaling. And so I have really evolved in my bullet journaling style. But one of the things that has come out of that is needing a calendar setup. I am a very visual person, so I need to see where things are lining up on what day of the week. It is really, really helpful for me in particular. And so my calendar is very trusty for me. I do a Monday start calendar. I will not apologize for it. It is how my brain works. My work week starts on Monday. It typically ends on Thursday. And then my weekend is Saturday and Sunday. Well, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday usually. So I like to see my whole weekend in a snapshot. So having Sunday at the beginning of the week is not quite how my brain works at this point. Because I wanted it to be very dreamy, I definitely leaned on the pastels pretty heavily, but I did need to bring in some of the darker colors just to keep a little bit more balance to the page. But when you're working with the pastels, it's kind of annoying to deal with the pencil lines that won't go away after you write over them. So that's why throughout the spread, throughout the setup, I have been erasing the pencil lines for anywhere that I am using the more pastel color palette, just so that the lines don't stick around after I mark over them. One of the things that I learned in 2024 is that while I can have some other stuff on this calendar page, I shouldn't clutter it up too much. So I have completely taken my finances out of my monthly pages. So I have a spread at the beginning of this notebook that has to do with my finances. It's pretty much just money in, money out. And then I have my financial notebook that I take a look at once a month. At the end of the month, I will kind of go through all of the things, money in, money out, and then mark it down in that financial planner as well. So I've taken that off of my calendar page just because it felt a little bit too cluttered. And because I wanted to do a lot more decoration this year, I really wanted to utilize a lot of that little white space area in the corners to provide some decoration that goes with the theme. I did like having my goals on my calendar page though, because my calendar page is one that I go to at least on a weekly basis, if not more. So it's nice at the beginning of the week to see my goals alongside my calendar when I'm filling stuff in for that week, and really kind of do a mental check-in, like, oh yeah, these are things that I want to work on, and like kind of look towards that as well. Now I am finally doing the first spread that is different from my 2024 spreads. I always had a cover page for every month, and I always had a calendar page for every month. But this one is going to be different because I am so sick of the way that I was doing habit trackers. And it's funny because that is how habit trackers have worked for me for the longest time. But because I did it that way every single month in 2024, I am just craving something different. So I switched my habit tracker to this vertical. So I have 1 through 31 on the side. I have spaces for, I think, 10 habits. So every other line is a little habit. I have a key there to say, hey, this is what the symbol means for habit tracking. And then I have a space for totals. And I think that's one of the things that I was really missing in my last habit tracker, is not having a space for totals. I kind of did that in the monthly review section if it was associated with a goal, but I haven't really been doing that so much. So I do have an example in the key. So I have strength training, I think AM meds, cardio, I don't know, something like that. I purposely did not mark them in yet because I don't know what life is going to look like. So I don't know what habits that I want to focus on. So that's why I didn't do that. I have my brain dump list in the upper right. That's going to be my master task list. So I have that set up into 3 spaces for basically home, work, business. I think that's the 3. And then I have a spark list, which is something that was in Joshi Corinne's 25 new bullet journal spreads or something to that effect. It's the idea of, oh, these are things that are going to spark motivation in me. So I have that towards the bottom. And then, of course, I will be adding some more things once I decide to do that. So again, check out my December to January migration. Leave a purple and pink emoji down in the comments below and what theme that you are doing for January, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.